So LBT, we're Adelaide based. We've been listed for some time now, so over 10 years. We're still a small cap company, and we're in the space of artificial intelligence. Staying in the healthcare kind of framework, we apply AI within clinical microbiology or pathology. So I'll go into explaining that in the subsequent slides. 2019 is a really big year for us and really an exciting year. We're really the last 10 years. We started developing this technology in 2010. So we're now nearly 2020. The good news is we have a product in the market, but it's taken a huge amount of time to get to where we are. And that's fairly typical for these medical-based technologies where you have to clinically prove they worked, build instruments. So while we're an AI company, we also have a physical instrument that we've had to develop, and we've got patents that really control the lighting, the imaging, as well as the machine learning algorithm that we've needed to train. So we've gone through extensive clinical trials, a 10,000 patient clinical trial. That body of data was submitted to the US FDA as part of what's called a de novo submission. De novo just means that there's no predicate. So the only predicate that exists is a manual plate read or a microbiologist reading a petri dish. And so we've been able to automate that step. So we've been able to get through all of that clinical validation. We've been able to get through the rigors of FDA and CE marking, so that's been completed for us. This week we announced our first European sale, which was really great, and we made our first Australian-based sale last year to St Vincent's Hospital here in Melbourne, and we're building a pipeline in the core markets that we're focusing on. So this is the instrument. APAS is the Automated Plate Assessment System. And what it does, it automates the reading of petri dishes. So all around the world, microbiologists sit at a workbench and they manually read growth on a petri dish. And what we've been able to do is we've identified an unmet need back in 2010, and we said, wouldn't it be really cool to be able to automate that? And so that's kind of where the technology came from, out of a university in Adelaide that LBT owned all the patents for. But now that we're selling the instrument, the value proposition for these labs is it's fairly small in its footprint. It's 3 times faster, so it does 200 plates an hour. Which is about 3 times faster than that of a manual read. It's available for sale. So with the various clearances that we've been able to achieve in the US only a couple of months ago, in Europe with CE markings last month, and in Australia, which was last year, we now have a product or an instrument that is on the market that is actively being sold. And there is no other technology that does what we do. Taking a step back and kind of looking at the customer base, think of your labs within a hospital, or perhaps your private labs, your Sonics, your Heliuses, ACLs and the like. They're our customers. And most people have heard of a urinary tract infection or a UTI. What happens with a UTI is you take a urine sample, and that sample is sent to one of these laboratories, and it's put onto this thing called an agar plate, which you can see up on the screen. It's incubated, and following incubation, literally a workbench similar to what you see on the screen exists, and you've got a very highly trained resource, a microbiologist, taking the lid off. No, there's no magnification. They're just doing a visual inspection, and they're looking to identify bacteria or colony growth that may exist on that petri dish. They make a determination, then they manually key in that information or the result into the laboratory information management system. We're not in the business, though, of putting microbiologists out of work. At any one time, in the US, as one example, 9% of microbiology jobs are vacant. So there are a global shortage of microbiologists. There are not enough microbiologists going through the university systems. And we see that, like I mentioned, in the US, but we also see that here in Australia, in Germany and the UK, which is where our core focus markets are in this first year of launch. I mentioned we've been at this kind of for a long period of time. We've always been in this clinical microbiology workflow. We understand it really well. In fact, our first product that we did commercialise successfully and brought to market automated the first part of the workflow. So that was the inoculation and streaking, or putting the specimen onto the agar plate and streaking it. And so that product was successfully commercialised. We received revenues along the way from 2009 until 2015. And then, as I mentioned, in 2010, we had the idea of automating the analysis or the reading of a culture plate. And so that's what we've been able to successfully develop and bring to market. It is a large global market opportunity, and we're really focused on those medium to large size labs, of which there are around 13,000 that we see globally. And what we're looking, when we look to segment that market, is those labs who are processing around 350 to 450 plus specimens per day. So that's kind of like, I guess, the lower end of the size and the quantum of specimens going through the lab. And that will be able to generate a return on investment of somewhere between kind of 2.5 to 3.5 years. So that's how we've been able to segment the market and identify the corresponding market opportunity. There is no direct competitor, there is no other product that automates the reading of culture plates. Everywhere around the world, it is manually done by a scientist. There are 2 products that exist with respect to automation across that workflow, and they're up on the screen. They start at $2.5 million US, and they automate the end-to-end process. They have camera technology, so they take a photo of the Petri dish, but you still have a scientist sitting at a screen doing the manual interpretation. So they're also looking at a very different segment at $2.5 million, and the size it is literally, you would need a room not far off the size of this auditorium to fit this instrument into the room, and it's got to be plugged in and the floors have got to be reinforced. It's a big undertaking. They're really targeting those large labs that exist, those 1,000 large labs or thereabouts that exist globally. And that's where we saw a real opportunity. We saw an opportunity both in the size, form and functionality of the instrument, so being modular in nature and looking to automate what a scientist does. So not looking to automate the end-to-end clinical workflow. You can train a technician to streak a plate. You can train an admin person to move the plate manually from the streaker into the incubator and then take it out of the incubator to a workbench. But you can't train a technician to do the reading. In fact, that's built into the reimbursement framework in all of the developed markets that we're targeting. So you need to have a trained microbiologist to do that work. So that's where we saw the opportunity, and that's the very specific niche application that we focused on. The revenue model is both a CapEx as well as an annuity style. So we have got a physical bit of kit, an instrument, that retails for $300,000 US. Then there's an annual software license of $30,000 US. This is really the heart of the technology. The instrument, while not being kind of too disrespectful to how complex it is, it's pretty straightforward. You load plates on the left-hand side, they mechanically move into an imaging station, photos taken, algorithm is run, and then they're moved to the output station. So there's some mechanics and some intelligence around that platform, but really the heart of the instrument, what makes it unique, is its ability to interpret pixel by pixel what's on that plate and make a clinical diagnosis and remove those negatives out of the workflow. So that's why we have a $30,000 per year annual software license, and it's not a discretionary thing. You can't opt in or opt out of it. It's an annual fee that's locked in and tied in to the instrument. And we'll look to market this instrument through our joint venture company, Clever Culture Systems. The useful life of these instruments, the way that labs look at it anyway, from a financial position, is 5 years. Typically, we see it's a 5 to 7 year useful life. We've engineered the product to have a 10-year useful life. Cost of goods, they're manufactured here in Australia at Planet Innovation, which is an engineering company based here in Melbourne, for $95,000 US. So a fairly healthy margin with respect to the instrument itself. And of course, once we've clinically validated and developed the software, it's really a plug-and-play annuity-style model with respect to that. In terms of the key stats, here's the graph. We've had a nice little spike of the share price early this week since releasing the good news of our European sale, which is positive. We've recently raised money. In June of this year, we raised $5 million. The company is well funded, so $10.2 million at the end of June. Our burn rate's about $1.5 million a quarter or thereabouts, and we expect that to be pretty consistent over the next year and a half. We expect an R&D tax incentive to come in this last quarter. There'll be kind of around $1 million. So that kind of $9.5 to $10 million cash at bank means that we have a really nice runway that we can get on with execution of our global growth plans over the next 12 months. We have got an experienced board. I've been with the company for a bit over 3 years, and prior to that spent 11 years with a company called Cochlear, and spent 4 years in the US with them, running various activities, and then a bit over 5 years out of Singapore running a bunch of the Asian countries. So a well-seasoned medical technology enthusiast, if you like. Our chair, Kate Costello, has been with the board since inception, and then we have a nice diverse group of non-executive directors, 2 US-based non-executive directors, one focused in the AI space, the other is more in the science space as well. So talking about our path to market, we are at the moment anyway a single product company, and really that means what we're doing for the moment is we're doing a lot of that heavy lifting. We're getting market access, getting all of the regulatory approvals in place and getting key opinion leaders signed up. But really the end goal is appointing a distributor or distributors based on various geographies. So the next slides will talk about what we've done with respect to really ticking those boxes around getting the development done, getting the regulatory approvals in place, and talking and starting that engagement with distributors. 2019 has been all about unlocking global markets. We're not going everywhere. As a small company, we've got to be really nimble and very sharp with our focus of what markets we want to go into. And so we launched here in Australia first. We understand the market very well. It's a small market, but perhaps representative of the bigger markets. And then we moved into Europe, specifically Germany and the UK and the US. So they're our 4 target markets. In each of those regions, what's really important is that you need to have a key opinion leader, someone advocating for the technology. We're the manufacturer of the product, so we're obviously very biased in the way that we sell it. But there's nothing better than when you have a key opinion leader advocating, they've got an instrument installed in their lab. And so that's what we've been busy establishing, that footprint. So we've got in Minneapolis a key opinion leader established, and they've provided publication for us. Labor Wisplinghof is in Cologne, Germany. They're the single largest lab in Germany, one of the largest labs in all of Europe. And Hilmar is actually here in Australia this week, and I was with him doing some investor visits on Monday. So he's a very strong advocate for the technology and has subsequently purchased that instrument this week. On the US commercialisation strategy, we submitted our 510K last year, and we received clearance for that in May of this year. It's a Class 2 medical device in the US, and what that means is that we can't actively promote, sell, and we certainly can't recognise sales from a transactional perspective until we get Class 2 clearance. So we've been able to achieve that, so we have an active product for sale when we got that clearance in May. But ahead of that, what we did is of the 5,500 odd hospitals and labs that exist in the US, our challenge is finding those labs, finding the right people, and really getting traction in the market. So we appointed an outbound call centre, a lead generation call centre. So we bought a database, and they've been busy working since February of this year, calling up all these hospitals and labs and doing a bit of an elevator speech and trying to build a sales pipeline. And so as of kind of a couple of weeks ago anyway, we've got about 150 qualified leads, and there's different categories of those leads that I won't go into. But effectively what we're doing is really focusing on those labs who've got budget, interested in the technology, and looking for automation as part of the solution within their lab. So we've had a real focus in the US, and also attended a number of trade shows along the way as well, which is important. On the EU side, we did appoint a salesperson based in Germany very late last year. They effectively really started in January, and they've been busy doing all of that on the ground support. The market size in Germany is about 325 to 350 laboratories. Interestingly, that a lot of those labs, there's a chain of 4 labs that exist, Sonic being one of them. They account for around 60% of all of the throughput of labs. So they're the ones that we're focused first. But there are other labs in the public hospital setting that we're also talking with who are interested. But it was a key milestone to have Labor Wisplinghoff purchased the instrument this week. He's had the instrument for about 18 months, actually. And it's really been in the capacity of helping us develop further analysis modules or software for the instrument. And he's published that data for us and presented at a large trade show early this year. So he's been part of our development journey and also a strong advocate for the technology with this recent sale. If we look at just those, because I mean we can talk about large numbers and big market opportunity, but let's focus just specifically on those 4 countries that we're actively now selling. So that's Australia, the UK, Germany, and the US. The US is 1,500 labs, so it's the single largest market globally for us. We still have a very large market opportunity, so about 2,000 labs. And what this slide looks at is if you were to kind of apply a penetration rate, and that will take some time to get to, the corresponding figures. It's an illustrative diagram to at least give you a sense that of the numbers that we're talking about as we start to get traction from a sales and generation process. This is another example because I think while we've got a couple of sales on the board, I think what the market's really interested in is, well, how long is it going to take and how quickly we're going to get there. And it is a 12-month sales cycle. So it is a CapEx style equipment. We do have leasing models that are available. But I thought this slide was a good one to give a bit of a case study. Now, the first product down there on the bottom left is the Previ Isolate. So this was the first product that LBT actually brought to market. So we know that really well. So that's the product that automated the inoculation and streaking. So after nearly 6 years, about 5.5 years, they were able to sell globally through a single distributor, which was bioMérieux, a large French diagnostic company, around 500 instruments. We take another example, which is a product called the MultiTof. This is within the same workflow that APAS exists in. It does a positive identification of the bacteria, a very disruptive product when it was released. It took a long time to get through the US FDA, and when it did, it really kind of hockey sticked up. But even so, you look at that 10-year kind of period and the number of instruments globally that they were able to sell, just to give you an idea of what that potential market opportunity is, of course, when you appoint a distributor. And again, giving you up on the screen there what that corresponding market size would look like as you apply that to APAS. So as we conclude, we're at a really exciting juncture. We've spent 10 years and around $26 million developing this APAS platform. We've really de-risked a lot of the traditional barriers and risk applicators that apply for medical technology companies when we're introducing them into the commercial market. So we've been able to get the regulatory clearances. We've clinically proven the product and have had a number of publications that are out in the market. We now have customer advocacy here in Australia, in Europe, and also in the US. We have a number of trial site evaluations that are underway. We've raised money recently off the back of FDA clearance, so we're really well funded, giving us a good runway to really execute on our plans. And we think obviously we're quite undervalued at the current rate, and really I think the market's just seeing how quickly we'll be able to mobilise, appoint these distributors, which we expect to do in 2020. So I'll leave it there and open it up to questions.
So, do we have questions?
One here. Brent, I just wanted to get you, if you could, to take us through the key opinion leader situation you have with the reference labs. How do you actually use that resource when you have, say, 3 or 4 customers who are considering buying an APAS unit? How can you actually help them get access to that reference lab? And the other small question I had was, do you have any opportunities in, say, water or dairy with the APAS unit?
Yep. So starting with the first question, so the way that we utilise these key opinion leaders is we refer to them as a centre of excellence, and other customers who are looking to evaluate whether or not APAS might fit their profile, they will visit these reference sites. So For example, Hennepin in Minneapolis, we've had a number of site visits from other labs in different states fly to Minneapolis and meet with Dr. Hansen and the team there. They get to see the instrument working, see it in situ, and hear directly from him and his staff around their experience using the instrument. Dr. Wisplinghoff in Cologne, Germany, very similar situation. We have an event at his lab actually in a couple of weeks where we're hosting about 14 key opinion leaders. A few from the UK are flying across and some from other parts of Germany. And so part of the selection criteria of appointing these Centre of Excellence sites was ensuring the dynamic was right that would support us with our commercialisation plans, because we know it's a groundbreaking new technology. People need to be comfortable with it, and they certainly want to hear from the professionals who have had experience using the instrument from an early stage. In terms of the platform, you're absolutely right. So we have the physical kit in place. We have the algorithms trained for urine and MRSA, and we'll continue to develop. The opportunity for us really lies in extending that platform. And so there is opportunity for dairy and water. We've done some specific work with water, and that application is part of our R&D pipeline.
Before I ask my kind of complicated question, well done to get to where you are, by the way. But my question is, there's so much innovation, and the pace of innovation in this space is so rapidly increasing at a phenomenal pace, which probably represents an opportunity for you. But I guess my question more is, fast forward 5-10 years from now, what do you see as the biggest threat you face?
Look, we know those other two competitors who I showed on the screen. They're working on an AI platform. So AI, everyone's doing AI. I think that's kind of the case. So AI for us it's a core competency for what we do. We've been at it since it was not a buzzword, right? I think the difference with the many AI companies that are out there at the moment, they identify points of interest. So they're not making clinical diagnosis, and it's fairly easy, I say easy in inverted commas, to download a deep learning platform from Google as one example and have a reasonably thought out data set, throw it into the algorithm and get pretty good results. But there's a big difference when you're making a clinical diagnosis. And so for us as a class 2 medical device, the bar's raised, which is meant we've had to do this 10,000 patient clinical trial, and now as part of the predicate, we've set the predicate for the US at least. And so it means that any competitor getting into the space and looking to make those clinical decisions equivalent to where we've set the bar have to reach those performance criteria. And that's why these companies that are much larger than us and have these very big end-to-end instruments are finding it quite challenging.
Do you have to pay these opinion leaders?
No, they're not paid. Yeah, so it's really interesting. I mean, they're obviously doctors. They like publishing information, and they inherently like to get access to early technology. And so it was the US was quite tricky. We took a fair bit of time to find the right US partner, because no one's probably heard of Hennepin Healthcare, right? They're a small community, relatively small community-based hospital, but the dynamic and the aligned motivation was what we were really looking for. They were open to bring people into their lab. He was very keen to look to publish, really enthusiastic about the technology. So that's the difference in the US, where most of the big names labs, absolutely you'd have to pay them to do it, which didn't fit our particular motivation.
Oh, hi. I'm just wondering, tell me about the balance sheet and what your cash position's like at the moment, please.
Yeah, so we've just raised money, so $5 million in June, $10.2 million in the bank. Mentioned before, we burn about $1.5 million a quarter. We expect that to be consistent on a go-forward basis. We'll have about $1 million of R&D tax coming in, so a really healthy cash balance where we're not needing to go back to the market anytime soon. And it really allows me and management to get on and execute the plans that we've got, which is all about getting distributors appointed, getting further traction with respect to these early sales.
Over there.
Hi, I noted you've got about a 90k transfer price from PI. Are you looking at any cost down opportunities once sales are established?
Yeah, there's significant cost savings in particular with the imaging platform. So the camera, would you believe it or not, is already end of life. So we've already got a replacement camera because we've taken so long to get this to market. So with volume, with cost down reduction that we've already kind of got in our pipeline and started looking at, there's definitely opportunity to cut that down. Probably don't want to go into details of what it specifically is, but we've certainly got that as an active project and certainly an opportunity for the company.
We know there's 25 million human potential clients for your product. Have you thought about the veterinary numbers that exist in Australia, which is a heck of a lot more?
Yep. Yes, good question. We have. I think the veterinary space, while the market's bigger, as you outlined, the price sensitivity is also a big consideration. So there's no way they would pay $300,000 for something like that. But it's certainly an area, I think, as we've built the capability and looking at allied applications, it's definitely something we have considered.
Just as a suggestion, if I were sitting in your space, the first thing I would do is go and look at the people who do leasing packages around schools and a lot of other places, and also the vets, city vets anyway, have formed into groups. They're owned by companies, and I'm quite sure they own the labs, and I'm quite sure your price wouldn't put them back very far at all.
Good. Thanks for the suggestion.
Have you done an alternative cost analysis of the incumbent technology that ultimately you want to replace, which also comes with a whole lot of that labour hours that you will replace as well? And has that given you some heart in terms of the likelihood that, you know, the incumbents will look at your alternative technology?
Yeah, so we're competing against labour, I think, as you mentioned, and so some of the characteristics that make our proposition attractive is that it's very difficult to get labour. We find that in particular in the northeast part of the US, as one example, and also in Texas. And like I mentioned before, you have to be a qualified scientist or a microbiologist, so that is tied into the reimbursement system. So that's definitely an important characteristic with respect to access to labour. We don't really see microbiologists being put out of work necessarily. When we talk to customers, it's really about redeployment. Most of these companies are growing, so they're getting more and more volume. There's more and more routine screening and specimen processing in these labs with the advent of our ageing population and the like. So we see an increase in specimens going through the labs, we see a shortage in labour, and so really our customers are crying out for something that can support them.
How quickly can you ramp up production? I mean, if there's 13,000 customers, as you say, it wouldn't take long if you've got a good rep on the road.
Yeah, so remember the sales cycle still is a long one, so there's still a 12-month kind of sales cycle, and we've got to get it into the budgeting process and the like. But look, PI we've got a very flexible arrangement with them. We're not concerned at the moment with respect to manufacturing. We've actually procured ahead of time all of the long lead items. So in the case where we do see a spike, well then we have an ability to make the product and ramp up quite quickly.
My question was related to that, actually, because you said you're going to be appointing your distributors in 2020, and the sales cycle is 12 months. So when do you expect production to pick up? When do you expect to be cash flow positive, when revenues to hit, and all those sorts of things?
Yeah, so remember in Europe, so in Germany and the UK, we've had a salesperson on for about 12 months now. In the US, we've got the 150 odd leads that I mentioned from February. So the goal is to actually hand over that work. And so the distributors that we're talking with are large in scale, so they have an ability to, they have complementary products that fit into their existing portfolio. They've got a mobilised sales team on a global and regional basis, as well as a service team. So in the discussions that we're having with them, and we announced recently we've shipped an instrument to a US-based distributor that fit the profile that I just mentioned, then part of the work that we're doing together is not only about the technology and the due diligence and the serviceability, but also about the customer messaging, looking at the customer base, and you would probably expect that we're in a joint fashion, working with potential customers much earlier than when we would appoint them. What they want to do is, as a big name, they want to put their name to it and then quickly announce all these sales. That's kind of their strategy. They don't want to see any risk associated with it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please thank Brent.
Thank you.